dragon use the magic sword?
Oh, Jesus, I'm in uncharted territory here, guys.
Hey guys and girls, Stranger Things fans, Board now back with you for my start on Stranger Things 2. So this is episode 1, chapter 1 of the second season. It is called MADMAX, all in caps, so a beautiful 80s reference there. And it is of course referring to the queen of the arcade, and that is Max herself, the introduction of Sadie Sink to the Stranger Things universe and a regular character from here on. She makes a debut in this episode along with her attractive but really weird and creepy brother Billy. I'll talk more about him during the course of the season, and the boys of course become infatuated with her. We also get introduced to the Palace Arcade, which is where they first hear of Max. She is, of course, the mystery new kid in town with the brand new high school, which score at this particular game, which the boys are all in love with and just wondering who it is. And hey, fair play to Max for subverting the stereotypes that girls actually can not only play video games but kick the boys' ass. Now, I will dedicate this review to my regular tag team partner Rachel McDonald. Rachel is recouping from her surgery and should be back in time for season 3, but we will do a special season 2 video as well. She should be back just in time for me to give her another ass kicking. Is what to add to that. But this goes out to Rachel anyway. And we also have to deal with something else in season 2, and it's these guys on screen. What a random opening that was, but hey, you know, we'll get back to them later on in the season. Fair to say, both me and Rachel, when she gets back, will have plenty to say about a certain episode 8 involving these random punk characters. More on that later on in the season. But in any case, back to this episode. It's a really solid start to the second season, and not a great deal happens. A lot of it is set up, and it mostly is character stuff. I think just picking back up with the characters as we're now a year on, we're 1984 in the timeline of Stranger Things 2, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the episode. Now, one of the things they're doing with Will this season is then obviously a year on, he is still struggling to completely get over what happened to him last year in the Upside Down, so he is struggling with that. He has psychological problems to the point where they've arranged that every time he has like an incident, he has to go back to like this psychologist, this government appointed psychologist, and well, wouldn't you just know it, because it's Stranger Things and he's been and it's Will and they've appointed him this psychologist. It means there's something a little shady going on. Now, you may have guessed that because of the casting of one Paul Reiser, Beverly Hills Cop, bunch of other things, but he really looks slimy in this. I guess he's taking the Matthew Modine title for this season. Just the moment he came on screen, anyone who's seen his character in Aliens should really know that this slime bag, no matter how smooth he appears, cannot be trusted. But What's quite sweet and nice about the scene is that Joyce and Hopper take Will together. They both go to the to the psychologist with him. So again, they're sort of acting as like a father and mother type unit for him. But yeah, as he's being interviewed by the Paul Raisin character, we do see like other scientists like listening in and monitoring him, and we see later that they're basically experimenting with, like these creatures now, and once again like the Upside Down. So obviously that shit is continuing, and Paul Raisin, as I said, is the new Matthew Modine. But it's sort of going to be Will's thing for at least the opening episodes, where he's still having psychological flashbacks. He's still haunted by it. He's a little redrawn. He hasn't fully returned to normal Will, and it's going to add a bit of drama to him and the regular boys. Obviously, Mike especially is protective of him and wants to, really help him. But another thing we see with Mike in this episode is then he of course is still has that glimmer that the Now might still be out there. 11. We see him, radioing her at one point, just in this glimmer of hope that she may be around. And you know what? She just may be. But there's some good stuff with the gang. Obviously, they've started going to this arcade, and that's when they first see the name on the scoreboard, the new top scorer, MADMAX, I should say. And there's a bit of banter with this Weasley guy, Charlie, who, by the way, has a crush on Nancy and won't tell them the high score unless Mike sort of prostitutes his sister in a way, tries to get her to go out with him. Bad luck for Charlie, because at this point Nancy's still with Steve. Not that I think she would be interested in this guy anyway, but fair play to Mike, he actually stands his ground. But we do get more teenage shenanigans. I really like the opening of the episode and the sort of swing of it, where you have Mike raiding Nancy's piggy bank to get money for the arcade, and it's a nice little scene where you're wondering, well, what's he taking money for? And Nancy chases after this, bring it back. Calls him an asshole, which is funny. And we sort of see in this episode that Mike has been acting up quite a lot, because at one point Karen has a word with him at the dinner table, and Ted is about as much use as he always is, basically. Sort of classic Ted, just chipping in with random comments and not really helping out. But it's further character development. But they delve deeper into the 80s and the era in this episode, because we also have a nice little plant of where we see a Reagan and Bush campaign poster on one of the lawns. But anyway, Max is introduced the next day at school. She's this new girl who they immediately the boys immediately take a liking to. She's introduced, she's driven into school by her character Billy, which, as I said, is someone we'll talk a lot about this season, I'm sure, and even season 3, because he's a very strange character. I mean, the only sort of glimpse we get of him is that he has a bit of a bad boy persona, I guess, for this is what passes for a hunk in the 80s, because the girls in the parking lot are all checking him out, and it's one of those comedic sort of routines, and that's just what we get of him. Then he's a bit of a bad boy, and he's a bit mean to his sister, or so it seems. But Max, it's really cool in the scenes we see with her. She doesn't say a great deal, but she's really cool and funny, and I think Sadie Sink just has this energy about her and is such a natural. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more of her with the gang. It's just a fun vibe she brings, but it's another like fun little subversion. Obviously, her being in a way a bit more like one of the guys, but also having her own like attitude and being quite withdrawn. So it's a really solid sort of debut for her, and we see more of the arcade stuff. So pretty solid stuff, and at the same time it builds certain things with certain things going on, like something rumbling around in Dustin's like bins at one point, whatever that's meant to be. Also, just like maybe the highlight with the Max stuff is Dustin and Lucas getting all competitive over her, which I absolutely love. Dustin keeps making this irritating noise, and like at one point it says, yeah, she can't resist these pearls, but it would mean in his teeth, and it's very cringe but very funny and cute, and it's just again relatable stuff, the way like teenage boys or pre-teens would like fall for this girl and then get really competitive. And there's this playful edge to it where, because they're staking out the arcade at one point to wait for Max, and at one point, yeah, Lucas is like trying to get rid of Dustin, saying, I can call you if she comes along. You don't have to wait. So it's that sort of stuff. It's all really good stuff. We also see Joyce with her new boyfriend in this episode, which seems to be a new thing because she's met. Bob, his name is, and he's met the family because we see him around there, but I get the impression it's quite new because they seem to work together and they seem to be like sneaking away to have make-out sessions in the back room at work. So that gives me the impression it's still quite new, unless it's just one of those things where they don't get that much time to do it around the house because of kids and stuff, so maybe they sneak away at work. He is, of course, played by Sean Astin, I should say. So another classic 80s staple of a casting, so they're really going deep. And I know Rachel has a love for Bob, so we'll see how we go with Bob. I remember the first time around he did a lot to endear me to him as the character went on. At first I thought, yeah, this guy is too much of a Weasley square, but they do actually somehow make him sort of like likeable over the course of the season. He's obviously got terrible taste in movies. Mr. Mom is his pick for the video night, which is just hilarious because obviously like Jonathan's lined up some cool probably 80 slashers for him and Will to watch. There's a sweet scene with Jonathan and Will, actually. I do like when he's saying, it's alright to be a freak. We're all freaks. I'm a freak. It's much cooler to be a freak. And he uses like this nice analogy of who would you rather be, or who would you rather be friends with? Like he says like David Bowie or Kenny Rogers, which I absolutely loves it. And that's when Square Bob walks in and he's like, hey, I love Kenny Rogers. And it's like, yeah, they both roll their eyes. So that's another nice little scene with Jonathan and with Will. So, and you obviously, there's the running theme, because you have the finger licking good thing with Steve in this, when him and Nancy go to visit Bob's, not Bob's, I've got Bob on my mind, obviously, Barb's parents. I was close. So that continues Nancy's little thing, and she obviously feels really guilty and awkward that she can't tell them the truth about what happened with Barb, and yeah, she's obviously keeping tabs with them, and they reveal that they've hired a new investigator to try and find Barb, and Nancy in her own way is trying to say, is this really a good idea? And they're talking about selling the house, and they have a dig at Hopper as well, which is obviously tough for Nancy, and well, Steve, but Nancy especially to hear. So it's a really awkward dinner scene, but Nancy obviously later goes and has a breakdown, cries in the bathroom. So it's a tough scene for her, but it carries on the stuff with her and obviously coming to terms with what happened to Bart. So it's a good follow-up. And you know what? Speaking of Steve and Nancy, I would say round 3. Yes, the ongoing debate / squabble between me and my regular co-host Rachel. It's I'll say to Rachel here, if she's listening, which I'm sure she is, it's 1-1 in this episode. It's 1-1 because there's a good scene between Nancy and Steve when they're like talking about him and his application to get into college. He has like an important assignment that she's helping him with, and that's all good stuff because that feels like a very natural thing for like a teenage couple to be doing, especially at this important stage. And it definitely fits the Nancy would be helping Steve out in something that important. It actually gives them something quite meaty to do and quite realistic, I think. And there's stuff with Steve where he's thinking of giving up and she's trying to encourage him, but he's saying things like, well, my father offered me to be in his business and it doesn't sound that bad. But it's also a point to me, Rachel, and the point is because Steve still acts quite immature in this episode. There's sort of his reactions at time when they're talking about oh, it's not worth it and all this sort of. But also later on when he jumps out at Nancy, you've got Nancy and Jonathan, and again I know they're playing up this love triangle, which is something which I'm probably not a big fan of. I know Rachel's not, but obviously Nancy and Jonathan are talking in the hall. I will say this is pre-Halloween. This is the night before Halloween, and Halloween is going to play a part in the next episode. But Steve jumps out and he does the cheesy boyfriend thing where he's like, oh, Nancy's like, I've not seen you for an hour, and it's like, yeah, I know, I missed you too much, and just kisses her, and it's like, yeah, grow up. So Steve's still being a bit immature. So I think for this episode, it's 1-1 in that debate. But I will say, actually, maybe the funniest thing in the episode, and there's a lot of funny things, but the thing that tickled me the most was the little dig at Jonathan, like the little meta dig they have, because Nancy's trying to get him to go to the Halloween party. And he doesn't want to go. He's like, well, I'm going to take Will trick-or-treating. And she's like, yeah, but then what about the rest of the night? And she sort of does have a dig where saying, you're just going to go home and you're just going to, like, listen to a Talking Heads LP and read Kurt Vonnegut. And Jonathan's like, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good night. And it's just this funny meta dig at like Jonathan as like this brooding sort of quite arty self-important sort of character. So it really made me chuckle in that. But it's a pretty good scene anyway. And later on we obviously lead to the cliffhanger of the episode. Or not so much a cliffhanger, but a big reveal, and that is then it confirms then 11 is still around. She's still in Hawkins, but the only one that knows it is Hopper, and she's been living with Hopper, and she now has hair, and he's obviously he goes to the cabin to see her after work, and they have lunch. So really good stuff, nice ending. So that's the opening episode of Stranger Things Season 2, MADMAX. So what do you think of the episode? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media, and I'll be back with more Stranger Things reviews soon. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.